Hey there, folks. This is T. Blake Brady, author of the Rolson McCain Southern Mystery Series, among other things. Today, we're all here because I'm going to be talking about the final story in Stephen King's novella collection, If It Bleeds. So join me as I answer 6 questions, 6 ideas that I had after finishing this story. Let's get to it. So the first question is, what happens? And what happens in the story is that a moderately successful teacher slash writer named Drew gets an idea for a novel. And so he goes to his father's old cabin to write said novel. The backstory is that the last time he tried to write a book, as opposed to a short story, which is in his milieu, is that he kind of lost it and nearly burned his house down. And so that's kind of the driving machine behind this story. And what happens when he gets there is that he gets really sick, and then he thinks he imagines talking to a rat. Now this is where spoilers really get into play. It's kind of a monkey's paw, 3 wishes sort of scenario where the rat says that I will grant you 1 wish. I will finish this novel. You will finish this book, but one person you know will have to die, someone you love. And he's faced with that conundrum. It's kind of like killing a sacred deer. I don't know if you saw that movie, but that's kind of lifted straight from that. So the guy, it turns out to be his English department head at the university where he teaches, so he decides to go through with it, and shenanigans occur, and that's mostly the story. I don't want to give away too much, but it's of the 4, I think that this, along with Mr. Harrigan's Phone, are my 2 favorite stories in this novella collection. Question 2, is it a horror story? Yes. There's some, weird stuff in there. Talking to a rat, it's absurd, but it kind of functions just like a lot of the old, it's almost like an old episode of The Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where you have someone who is given the opportunity to do something but at the cost of something else. I mean, I know Stephen King, in the sort of liner notes for this collection, says he doesn't know where the story came from, but it is a callback to EC Comics and Creepshow and all the things that Stephen King did earlier in his career. It's also really, it reminds me a lot of Secret Window, Secret Garden from 4 Past Midnight, where you have it deals with the ideas surrounding writing and where ideas come from and how they come to fruition and what happens when you can and can't write. Writer's block is a big theme in some of Stephen King's stories, especially when the main character is a writer, which is often. So yeah, I think it's a great, well-paced horror story, and it does a thing that I really enjoy, which is it isolates a character so that they have to deal with all their neuroses. And I love when Stephen King does that. You see it in The Shining, Secret Window, Secret Garden, which became the movie with Johnny Depp, Secret Window. So I love when Stephen King does those kinds of stories. Question 3, would this be better in theaters or on Shudder? Shudder, if you don't know, is the horror streaming service. $5 a month. It's amazing, and it has like the new series devoted to Creepshow. They just had the 1st season. So if you like horror stuff, check that out. That's not a plug. It's a free plug. They don't invest in the show, but I actually think this one could go either way. I never thought that Secret Window, Secret Garden could be a film, but I think it would do really well on Shudder. It would actually do really well on Netflix if someone like Mike Flanagan got involved, like he did with Gerald's Game. So I'd say it could have either a limited theatrical release or kind of a Netflix run. That'd be kind of cool. Or, I mean, Shudder would be also perfect for it. You can cast it yourself. Maybe put a comment. Who would play the main character in your eyes? Number 4, what is the best scene? That's a hard... I think the most memorable scene has to be when Drew, the main character, talks to a rat. Duh. I mean, that's clearly a really memorable scene because it's so surreal. I also kind of ironically think that the most mundane aspects of the story are really intriguing. I think when Stephen King writes about real life and those sorts of things leading up to a story, I always love those moments because they feel so real to me. And so when he stops at what he calls the 90, the convenience store where he picks up all the junk and talks to the guy who knows his dad and all that, that just felt like something that you'd see in a really great TV series or movie. So I really love that scene. There are a few scenes actually in the convenience store that I thought were amazing. So, but on top of all of those, I'd put the rat story. I also think that the phone calls between the husband and wife feel very realistic. There's a lot of realism in the way that they fight. Anyone who's married knows what that feeling of disappointing your spouse is like. And yet doing something because you feel like I need to do this. So I like that. There are a lot of really, I think, cool scenes in this story, but the rat scenes definitely stand out. Number 5, what story or stories does it remind you of? I've already mentioned a couple of these. I think it is definitely reminiscent of Secret Window. They both deal with the idea that a writer isn't always in control of his faculties. And I think that's true. I think people who don't write underestimate the ways in which a story can take over for you and sort of lead you, and you just kind of follow the characters and what they do. Stephen King has always been interested in the meta aspects of writing, and this is just another example. It's different from, say, The Shining or Secret Window in that this is a Faustian bargain story. So you get the idea that this character has to trade something off to get the result. So it's less like those two stories, but it is about madness. I expected the story to go much more in the direction of madness than it actually goes. But you also have to have the comeuppance at the end. So I'm sure there are lots of other writing stories in Stephen King's oeuvre that would match this, but I think those two are pretty one-to-one. It makes me want to actually go back and reread Secret Window. Okay, and the final thought or idea, I wanted to rank Stephen King's novella collections. I thought it'd be too onerous for me to try to do all of the Stephen King short story collections and rank them, but I feel like the novella collections, there's a difference between a short story and a novella. They have a different structure usually, and they feel different when you read them. And Stephen King's released 5, which makes it a nice sort of round, not even, but round number. And so going from my least favorite to my favorite, here's how I'm going to rank them. Number 5, Hearts in Atlantis. I think it was an experiment that was really cool, but ultimately it didn't work for me. I like the story, Hearts in Atlantis itself, the original, the first story about Stephen King going to college. It's very semi-autobiographical, but the rest of it's pretty forgettable for me. I'd put If It Bleeds at number 4 overall on the list. I think If It Bleeds and Mr. Harrigan's Phone and Rat are all really memorable. I wonder how readable they are. We're so close to the release. Everything when you first get it, it's like, ooh, this is new and shiny. But I don't know how much of a reread I'll ever actually do on any of them. I'd love to reread Rat. I think Mr. Harrigan's Phone's really cool. If It Bleeds, I probably won't revisit. Same for The Life of Chuck. So, number 3, 4 Past Midnight. I love I love Secret Window. I almost put at first I put If It Bleeds above it, but I've read Secret Window several times over the last since I first read it a long time ago. The other stories are okay, like Sundog and the library policeman are all pretty good horror stories, and I could see myself eventually rereading them, but it's kind of middle of the pack. My top two, my second favorite is Full Dark No Stars. I think that those are all brutal stories from 1922, which has the Thomas Jane movie on Netflix about the guy who kills his wife. The movie is okay, but the story is phenomenal. And when I read it, I was completely wrapped by the story. Just could not put it down. The whole book, actually. There's A Good Marriage, which I think is chilling. It's very obviously about BTK. It's a very BTK sort of story. But it asks the question, what would you do if you found out that your significant other was a serial killer? And I actually reread that story recently, and it still holds up. That and Big Driver are just amazing, amazing stories. I think Stephen King, in those, there's little to nothing that is supernatural, but it is a sharp, those are all sharp blades. And when you read them, they just cut, and they're just amazing. Stephen King at the top of his game. And then I think, obvious, unequivocal, like there is no debate top set of novellas is Different Seasons. That's got Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption in it, The Body. It also has, I think The Breathing Method is at the end of that one, which I really don't care for. But Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption is easily worth all the stories combined together. So those are my top ones. If you have a different opinion, please put those in the comments. These are just my opinions. There's nothing definitive about these. So I just want to thank everybody for stopping by. I'm T. Blake Brady. You can call me Tyler. That's just my writing name. And subscribe and like, ding, the videos. I don't care if you subscribe. I want you to subscribe, but it's not about me. It's not about my ego and the likes either. It's about getting more people to see these videos. So if you're like, man, I think people should see this, give it a thumbs up. That's what it's all about. So make sure you do that. I don't mind asking for it, so please do. And check out all of the books that I write. That's one of the reasons why I have this channel, is to bring some awareness of the Rolson McCain series. I'll put links in the show notes. So, all right, folks. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time when I read another book or story. So, bye.